You went to the grocery store this week. You picked up spinach, strawberries, maybe a bag of grapes. You were being healthy. You were eating your vegetables. Here's what you weren't looking at. The spinach you just bought has more pesticide residue by weight than any other produce tested in the entire United States Department of Agriculture dataset. The strawberries next to it may carry residues of dozens of pesticides, including fungicides that independent researchers have linked to hormone disruption, thyroid dysfunction, and harm to the developing nervous system. Now, I need to be precise about something before we go any further. The Environmental Working Group is an advocacy organization. They compile government data and rank it. The USDA and the EPA will both tell you that 99% of the time, residue levels are below legally set limits. That debate is real, and I'll cover it fairly later in this video. But here's what I want you to understand first. 203 pesticides found in the produce in your shopping cart is a data point that deserves your attention, regardless of where you come down on what's safe. Today, we are going item by item through the official 2025 Dirty Dozen, all 12 on the list, plus the 2+ items added this year for high toxicity, telling you exactly what was found on each one, what the specific health concerns are, and what the clean 15 items are that you can buy conventional without worry. This is the most important grocery video I've ever made. The Dirty Dozen list has been published by the Environmental Working Group almost every year since 2004. It is not EWG zone testing. That's an important distinction. EWG analyzes data collected and published by the USDA's Pesticide Data Program, the most rigorous produce pesticide testing operation in the world. Every year, the USDA collects tens of thousands of produce samples from stores across the country and tests them for pesticide residues. Critically, and this is something the food industry often doesn't advertise, they test the produce the way you'd actually eat it, washed under running water for 15 to 20 seconds, and peeled where applicable. Bananas are peeled. Spinach is washed. If pesticides are still showing up after that preparation, they are showing up on your plate. In 2025, EWG updated its methodology in a significant way. Previously, the list was based purely on the quantity of pesticide residues, how many, how concentrated. This year, for the first time, EWG also incorporated pesticide toxicity, the actual capacity of each chemical to cause harm, using EPA no adverse effect level data obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request. This is why blackberries and potatoes are new to the list this year. It's not that they got dirtier, it's that the method now accounts for what those pesticides actually do to you. One more accuracy note before we go item by item. This is important. Because USDA doesn't test every produce type every year, EWG uses the most recent available data for each item. Spinach data, for example, comes from 2015 and 2016 USDA testing, the most recent year spinach was tested. Apple data comes from 2023. This means you're not always comparing the same vintage of data across items. EWG acknowledges this. It's a real methodological limitation, and it's worth knowing. Here are the 4 chemical classes you'll hear about in almost every item on this list. First, fungicides applied to prevent mold and mildew, often after harvest. Fludioxonil, pyrimethanol, pyraclostrobin, boscalid. These show up at the highest concentrations on the Dirty Dozen and are raising increasing concerns about hormone disruption. Second, organophosphates, older insecticide class linked to neurotoxicity, largely declining in use, but still showing up. Third, neonicotinoids, newer insecticides once thought safer, now linked to nervous system harm and bee colony collapse. Fourth, pyrethroids, synthetic insecticides increasingly linked to neurodevelopmental harm in children. Spinach is number 1 on the 2025 Dirty Dozen, and this year, it displaced strawberries, which had held the top spot for 9 consecutive years. The specific finding, spinach has more pesticide residue by weight than any other produce type in the entire USDA dataset. Not just more kinds, more mass. More chemical, per gram of food you eat. Strawberries held the number 1 spot for 9 straight years. They're off the top, but they're not off the hook. The average American eats about 8 pounds of fresh strawberries a year, and with them, dozens of pesticides. More than 90% of strawberry samples tested positive for residues of 2 or more pesticides. The most chemically complex item on the entire list. Kale, collard, and mustard grains tested with 103 individual chemicals across the category, more distinct pesticide compounds than any other produce type. Hot peppers and bell peppers were second with 101. This is not 103 chemicals on a single piece of kale. It's 103 different chemicals detected across all samples. But the point stands, this category is exposed to the widest chemical cocktail of anything on the list. Grapes are a year-round staple in American households and a year-round dirty dozen fixture. Over 90% of grape samples tested positive for 2 or more pesticides. The dominant chemical, pyrimethanol, the same EPA-classified possible carcinogen found heavily on strawberries, showing up on grapes at 25% plus of samples. Fludioxonil is also present. Peaches carry one of the most striking single chemical statistics on the entire list. Fludioxonil, the fungicide applied post-harvest to prevent mold, was found on 90% of peach samples. 9 in 10. Fludioxonil has been linked by researchers to breast cancer risk because of its estrogen-mimicking properties and to harm to male reproduction. It also showed up in the highest average concentration of any pesticide found on the entire Dirty Dozen. Cherries are the relative good news on the Dirty Dozen. Of all 12 items, cherries were the only ones where samples did not show more than 50 different pesticides. They still made the list, the contamination is still real, but the comparison is instructive. Fewer distinct chemicals, lower average concentration. If you're going to make one concession and buy the conventional version of something on this list, cherries are the least bad option. Nectarines are essentially unpeeled peaches, same fruit, different skin, and their pesticide profile reflects it. Fludioxonil and pyrimethanol are again the dominant chemicals. Nectarines averaged more than 6 different pesticides per sample in USDA testing, among the highest averages on the list. Every piece of nectarine you eat has, on average, 6 different chemical residues on it. Pears carry one of the clearest examples of the EU versus US regulatory gap in this entire list. Diphenylamine, a chemical applied to prevent storage scald, the browning of apple and pear skin during cold storage, was found on more than 1 in 10 pear samples in USDA testing. The European Union banned diphenylamine in 2012 over cancer concerns. It is legal in the United States. Apples are the most consumed fruit in America and a perennial Dirty Dozen fixture. The signature chemical concern here is diphenylamine, the same storage scald preventer we just discussed on pears. Applied after harvest to keep apple skin cosmetically appealing during months of cold storage. EWG notes the EU restricted diphenylamine on apples while the US continues its use. Over 90% of apple samples tested positive for 2 or more pesticide residues. Blackberries are new to the 2025 Dirty Dozen, and they're new for a specific reason. The USDA tested them for the first time in 2023. This isn't a case of blackberries getting worse. It's a case of the data finally catching up. And what the first round of data showed, 93% of conventional blackberry samples had detectable pesticides, with an average of 4 pesticides per sample. Blueberries are one of the most nutritionally dense foods on the planet and one of the fastest growing categories in American produce consumption, with USDA data showing consumption has tripled since the mid-2000s. 90% of conventional blueberry samples had detectable pesticides. Americans are eating significantly more blueberries than they used to, and more of those blueberries carry pesticide residues. Potatoes are the most consumed vegetable in the United States, and they are new to the Dirty Dozen in 2025. The primary chemical of concern is chlorpyrifam, an agricultural chemical applied after harvest to prevent sprouting. It was found on nearly 90% of potato samples in USDA testing. The European Union ended its approval of chlorpyrifam in 2019 following a risk assessment that found health risks to consumers and agricultural workers. It remains in use in the United States. 2 items didn't make the official Dirty Dozen ranking this year, but EWG highlighted them separately because their overall toxicity scores were as high as, or higher than, some items that did. They're not on the list because of how the ranking methodology works. They're on the plus list because they deserve the same level of attention. Green beans are the most alarming item on this entire list. Not because of a new chemical, because of an old one that was banned a decade ago and is still showing up. Acephate is an organophosphate insecticide that the EPA canceled for use on green beans grown for food in 2011. That's 14 years ago. It has been illegal to apply acephate to food-grade green beans for 14 years. And yet, the USDA found it on 8% of green bean samples in 2021 and 2022. One single sample of conventionally grown green beans had acephate at a concentration 500 times greater than the EPA's allowed limit. Bell and hot peppers ranked second only to kale for total chemical complexity, 101 distinct pesticide compounds across the category. The EWG highlighted them as a plus item because their toxicity score placed them at the same level as items on the official Dirty Dozen. This is particularly notable because peppers are a cooking staple used in enormous quantities across almost every cuisine in America in salsas, stir-fries, salads, roasted dishes. I want to be fair. Here is the strongest case for the other side. The EPA, USDA, and the Alliance for Food and Farming all note that more than 99% of pesticide residues found on produce fall within the legal limits set by the EPA. The EPA says it is confident that the fruits and vegetables eaten in the U.S. are safer than ever. The AFEF has commissioned research suggesting that EWG's messaging, specifically the Dirty Dozen, causes lower-income consumers to buy less produce overall, including produce that is actually quite clean. And EWG's own Alexis Temkin consistently says the guide is not meant to discourage produce consumption. It's meant to help people prioritize where organic matters most. EWG's response and Consumer Reports' response is that legal limits are not the same as safe limits. That pesticide safety standards are set for individual chemicals, not for the cocktail of 4 to 6 different chemicals found simultaneously on a single piece of produce. And that children's exposure needs to be evaluated differently from adult exposure because developing nervous systems are more sensitive to disruption. These are legitimate scientific arguments. The debate is ongoing. Use this list as a tool, not a prohibition. Here's the good news, and there is real, actionable good news here. The same USDA data that produced the Dirty Dozen also produced the Clean 15, the 15 conventionally grown fruits and vegetables that had the lowest pesticide loads. Nearly 60% of Clean 15 samples had no detectable pesticide residues at all. These are items where buying conventional is a perfectly reasonable choice. Here is the most practical version of everything I just told you. 5 steps. You can start this week. The goal is not to stop eating fruits and vegetables. The goal is to eat them smarter. The Clean 15 exists specifically so that the cost of eating well doesn't become prohibitive. Buy the organic strawberries. Buy the conventional pineapple. Put the difference in your pocket. Now I want to hear from you. Tell me the one item on this list that surprised you most. And tell me which items in your own diet you're going to prioritize going organic, or if any of this actually changes how you shop. I want specific answers. The more specific you are, the more useful this comment section becomes for everyone watching. Drop it below. Like the video if this was worth your time. Subscribe to Grocery Uncovered for the full non-toxic grocery series. We've done fast food, parchment paper, and the Dirty Dozen. Next up, the additives hiding in your protein powder. I'm Marcus, and I'll see you in the next one.